I never thought a cat could save a family. I never thought a small, quiet, golden-eyed creature could walk through a door one morning and completely shatter everything we thought we knew about ourselves. But that's exactly what happened, and I'm still not over it. Even now, sitting here trying to find the right words, my hands are shaking a little. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about a cat. It's a story about blindness, about cruelty that doesn't even know it's cruel, about guilt that hits you like a truck at 3 in the morning when the house is quiet and you can't escape your own thoughts. They locked my cat outside every single night, in the cold, in the dark, alone, and they thought they were doing the right thing. But she, my sweet, patient, impossibly wise little cat, she didn't fight back. She didn't scratch or hiss or run away forever, even though she could have. Instead, she did something none of us ever expected. She brought something back. Something that none of us were ready for. Something that changed every single person in that house in ways we are still processing to this day. Stay with me, because this story starts in a small house with too many opinions and not enough love, and it ends somewhere none of us saw coming. Her name was Cleo. I named her that when she was just 6 weeks old, small enough to fit in the palm of my hand, her eyes barely open, her tiny body trembling the first time I held her. She had this coat of fur that was a mix of orange, white, and a little bit of dark brown, like someone had painted her in a hurry and didn't quite finish. She wasn't a fancy breed. She wasn't some expensive show cat with perfect symmetry and a pedigree certificate. She was just a kitten someone had found behind a grocery store in a cardboard box with 3 of her siblings. I took her home on a Tuesday afternoon when I was 26 years old, newly moved back into my childhood home after a really rough patch in my life. I had gone through a bad breakup, lost a job I loved, and found myself standing in my mother's kitchen at 26, feeling like everything I had built had quietly collapsed while I wasn't looking. My mom's house was never quiet. It never had been. It was one of those houses that was always full of people, full of voices, full of opinions. My mom, Linda, was a strong woman, practical, hardworking. She had raised 3 kids mostly on her own after my father left when I was 11, and she had done it without complaining much. I respected her enormously. But she was also a woman who had very fixed ideas about how things should be. And one of those fixed ideas was that animals did not belong inside the house. She had said it my whole childhood. Animals live outside. That's where they belong. God made them for the outdoors. It was almost like a rule carved into the walls of that house. When my brother had found a stray dog once and begged to keep it, she'd given it 3 days before finding it a new home. When my sister had brought home a hamster, it had lived in the garage. So when I walked through the front door that Tuesday afternoon with a tiny kitten wrapped in a dish towel, I already knew I was stepping into a negotiation. My mom looked at Cleo the way some people look at a bill they weren't expecting in the mail. Her eyes went flat. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "No," she said simply. "Mom, she's just a kitten. She was abandoned. She'll die if I—" "Outside animals stay outside, Maya." That was my mom. That was Linda. No dramatic speech, no long argument, just that flat, final tone that meant the conversation was technically still happening, but the decision had already been made. I negotiated, I begged, I pulled out every emotional tool I had. And eventually, we landed on a compromise that wasn't really a compromise at all. Cleo could stay, but only during the day. At night, she went outside. Every night, without exception. I told myself it was okay. Lots of cats lived outside. Cats were naturally nocturnal. She'd be fine. But I knew even then, in a quiet place behind my logic, that I was lying to myself. I want you to understand what Cleo was to me before I go any further, because you need to understand what it meant to watch her be treated the way she was. When I was going through the hardest months of that period in my life, The grief of the breakup, the humiliation of moving back home, the suffocating feeling that I had somehow failed at being an adult, Cleo was the one constant that made every single day bearable. She would curl up on my lap while I sent out job applications for the 100th time. She would press her small, warm head against my hand when I was crying at 2 in the morning and didn't want to wake my mom. She would sit in the window next to me and watch the rain, and somehow, inexplicably, her presence made the silence feel less like loneliness and more like peace. She never asked anything from me. She never judged. She never told me I should have seen the breakup coming or that I should have been more careful with my finances. She just showed up every single day and loved me in that quiet, steady way that cats have, that way that some people mistake for indifference, but is actually something much deeper. So when I say that watching her be pushed out the door every night hurt me, I mean it hurt me in a real and physical way, like something was being pressed on a bruise. My younger brother Daniel was living there too at the time. He was 23, working at a local auto shop, and he had inherited my mother's attitude toward animals almost perfectly. Maybe more aggressively, actually. He wasn't cruel, I want to be fair to him, but he was dismissive in a way that felt almost worse than cruelty sometimes. He would look at Cleo the way you look at a piece of furniture that someone else bought that doesn't match anything else in the room. "Why do you even have a cat?" he'd say, not even bothering to look up from his phone. "They don't do anything, they just sit there." "She keeps me company," I'd say. "Get a hobby," he'd say, and then he'd go back to his phone and Cleo would look at him with those golden eyes, completely unbothered, completely calm, and I always got the feeling that she understood him better than he understood himself. My grandmother, Nana Rose, also lived with us. She was 73, sharp as a tack, and deeply superstitious in the way that people from her generation often were. She had grown up with stories about black cats and bad luck and animals being signs of things. Cleo wasn't black. She was orange and white, but Nana Rose had decided almost immediately that there was something strange about her. She would watch Cleo sometimes with this narrow, suspicious look, like she was waiting for Cleo to do something confirming her suspicions. "That cat watches too much," Nana Rose would say. "She's just curious," I'd tell her. "Animals that watch like that know things," Nana Rose would reply, and then she'd make a little sound under her breath and leave the room. At the time, I thought she was just being superstitious. I thought it was the kind of thing old women said about cats because of old stories and old fears. But here's what I know now, sitting on the other side of everything that happened. Nana Rose was right. Cleo was watching. She was always watching, and she knew things. She absolutely knew things. High voltage build tension. The nights that broke me. The routine became something I dreaded. Every night, around 9 o'clock, my mom would appear in whatever room Cleo happened to be in, and she would open the back door. She didn't call Cleo over. She didn't try to make it gentle. She'd just open the door and stand there. And if Cleo didn't go on her own, and sometimes Cleo would sit very deliberately in the middle of the room like she was making a point, my mom would pick her up and carry her out. Not roughly. My mom wasn't a rough person, but firmly, the way you carry something that doesn't belong where it is. And then the door would close, and I would sit in my room and listen to the quiet and feel terrible. I tried everything I could think of. I bought a cat bed and put it on the covered porch, thinking at least she'd be protected from the rain. I left food and water out there every night. I bought a little heated pad for colder nights and placed it under the porch shelter. I would go to the back door sometimes at midnight just to check, and Cleo would be there, sitting on the edge of the porch, completely still, looking out at the backyard with those golden eyes, like she was keeping watch over something only she could see. She never cried at the door. She never scratched to come back in. And somehow, that was the part that made it worse, because she wasn't falling apart. She was dignified. She was handling it with more grace than I was. And every time I saw her sitting there in the dark, that dignity broke my heart a little more. There were mornings, winter mornings especially, when I would open the back door and find her wet from rain or shivering slightly in the cold, and she would walk inside like nothing had happened. She would go straight to her food bowl, eat calmly, and then come find me and curl up beside me like the night had been nothing, like she was fine, like she was telling me, "I'm okay, don't worry about me, I handled it." But I worried. Every single night, I worried. The comments from my family didn't stop either. If anything, they got more frequent as the weeks passed and Cleo remained in the house. Daniel started calling her the outdoor cat, even when she was inside, sitting on my lap in the living room. "Your outdoor cat is shedding on the couch again," he'd say with this little smirk. My mom would comment on the cat hair, on the food smell, on the litter box, even though I kept it spotlessly clean and it was tucked completely out of sight in my bathroom. Nana Rose would mutter things in a low voice whenever Cleo walked past her. One evening in November, it got worse than usual. I had come home from a job interview, one I had actually felt good about, and I was in a fragile, hopeful kind of mood, the kind of mood where everything feels possible and you're almost afraid to breathe too hard in case you break the feeling. Cleo met me at the door the way she always did, weaving around my ankles, and I picked her up and held her for a moment in the entryway, just breathing her in, letting the comfort of her settle over me. My brother walked by and stopped. "You know what's actually sad?" he said. He wasn't being aggressive. He said it in this casual, conversational way that was somehow worse. "You talk to that cat more than you talk to actual people, like it's your friend." "She is my friend," I said. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "It's a cat, Maya. It doesn't understand you. It doesn't care about you. It's just there because you feed it. The second you stopped feeding it, it would leave." I didn't answer him. I just walked to my room with Cleo in my arms and closed the door. But his words stayed with me. Not because I believed them, I didn't, not even a little, but because there's something uniquely painful about watching someone reduce something precious to you into something meaningless, like taking a painting off the wall and saying, "It's just paint and canvas." Technically true, completely missing the point. That night, when my mom opened the back door at 9 o'clock and Cleo padded outside, I stood at my bedroom window and watched her settle onto the porch. And I made a silent promise to her that I would find us somewhere else to live as soon as I possibly could, a place where she could sleep on the bed, a place where no one would open a door and carry her into the dark. I didn't know then that things were about to change. I didn't know that Cleo had already started doing something quiet and deliberate and extraordinary that none of us had noticed yet. It started small, so small that none of us registered it as anything. About 3 weeks into December, I noticed that Cleo was coming in from the nights slightly different. Not physically, she looked fine, healthy, well, but behaviorally. She had always been a calm cat, but now there was something almost purposeful about her. She moved through the house differently in the mornings, more deliberate, like she had somewhere to be, something to attend to. She started sitting near Nana Rose. This was the thing that first made me pay attention. Cleo had never particularly sought out Nana Rose. Nana Rose didn't like her and didn't hide it, and cats, in my experience, have an almost supernatural ability to sense when someone doesn't want them around. Most cats will avoid those people entirely or torment them by sitting exclusively on their laps, depending on the cat's personality. Cleo had always simply left Nana Rose alone, polite, neutral, unbothered. But now she was sitting near her. Not on her, Nana Rose would never have allowed that, but near her, on the arm of the sofa closest to Nana Rose's chair, on the floor near her feet, in the doorway of whatever room Nana Rose happened to be in, watching her with those calm golden eyes. Nana Rose was not pleased. "That cat is staring at me again," she'd announce to the room. "She's just sitting there, Nana," I'd say. "Animals stare like that for a reason," Nana Rose would say, and then she'd shoo Cleo away with her hand, and Cleo would move, but not far. She'd just relocate slightly and continue watching. I thought maybe Cleo had simply decided, in her mysterious cat way, to try and make peace with the household's most reluctant member. Cats do things like that sometimes. They pick the one person who doesn't want them, and they make it their quiet project. But it was more than that. I just didn't understand it yet. Then Daniel started noticing something too, though he wouldn't have admitted it was the cat that made him notice. He came to me one evening with this odd look on his face, slightly uncomfortable, like he'd seen something he was still processing. "Does Nana seem okay to you?" he asked. I looked up from my laptop. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. She just seems off. Sometimes she's a little confused. Like yesterday, she called me by Dad's name twice." I felt something shift in my chest. Our father had been gone for 15 years. Nana Rose had never once confused us with him. "I thought the same thing a couple weeks ago," I said slowly. "She forgot what day it was." "Twice." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "She's probably just tired," he said finally, and he walked away. But after that conversation, he started checking on Nana Rose a bit more. He'd stick his head into her room before bed. He'd bring her tea without being asked. Small things, but they were there. And Cleo kept sitting near her, watching. One night, it was a Wednesday, I remember, because I had just gotten a call back about a second interview, and I couldn't sleep from the nervous excitement. I got up at around 2 in the morning to get some water. The house was dark and completely quiet. I padded down the hallway in my socks, past Nana Rose's room, past Daniel's room, and headed toward the kitchen. And then I stopped. Cleo was sitting in the hallway, right outside Nana Rose's door. She was just sitting there in the dark, very still, facing the door, not scratching at it, not making any sound. Just sitting there with the kind of focused, alert stillness that cats have when they're paying close attention to something. I stood there for a moment, watching her. Something about the image made the hair on my arms rise slightly. "Cleo?" I whispered. She glanced back at me briefly, one calm look. Then she returned her attention to the door. I don't know what made me do it. Instinct, maybe, or some quiet alarm going off somewhere in the back of my mind. But I reached out and knocked softly on Nana Rose's door. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder. "Nana, you okay?" Silence. I opened the door. The room was dark, but for the street light coming through the curtain gap. Nana Rose was in her bed, and at first glance she looked simply asleep, but something was wrong. I could feel it before I could see it. She was lying at an odd angle, one arm hanging off the side of the mattress, her breathing audible in a way that didn't sound like sleep. It sounded labored, uneven. "Nana!" I was across the room in 2 steps, my hand on her shoulder. She stirred slightly but didn't fully wake. Her skin felt wrong, clammy and strange. Her face was slack in a way that frightened me immediately. I ran for Daniel. I screamed his name. I grabbed my phone and called 911 at the same time, stumbling back into the hallway, and Cleo moved aside to let me pass, still calm, still watching, like she had simply been waiting for me to do exactly what I was doing. The ambulance came in 11 minutes. 11 minutes that felt like 11 years. Nana Rose had suffered a mild stroke sometime during the night. The doctors told us that if she had been found in the morning, if she had lain there for another 4 or 5 hours, the damage would have been catastrophic, potentially fatal. But because she was found early, because help came when it did, the impact was minimal. She needed rehabilitation, she needed monitoring and medication and care, but she was going to be okay. She was going to be okay. I sat in that hospital waiting room at 4 in the morning with Daniel beside me, both of us stunned and pale and quiet. And I kept thinking about Cleo in the hallway, sitting in the dark, facing the door, waiting for someone to pay attention. "How did you know?" Daniel asked me, eventually, his voice rough. "What made you check on her?" I was quiet for a moment. "Cleo was sitting outside her door," I said. Daniel looked at me. "What?" "She was sitting in the hallway, right outside Nana's door, in the dark, just sitting there. It made me knock." He stared at me for a long moment and didn't say anything. Here is what I found out later, piecing things together from neighbors and from what little Nana Rose herself could remember. Cleo, during her nights outside, had not simply been sitting on the porch or wandering the yard. She had been going next door. Our neighbor, Mr. Patterson, was a 71-year-old retired school teacher who lived alone. He had been close with Nana Rose for years. They were the same generation, had lived on the same street for decades, shared a fence, and a fondness for arguing about gardening. He told me, a few days after everything happened, that for the past few weeks, a cat had been appearing in his yard at night. Orange and white, he said. Pretty little thing. I thought she was a stray at first, so I put some food out. But she wasn't interested in the food. She'd just sit by my fence and look at your house. Sometimes she'd sit there for an hour. Sometimes she'd disappear for a while and come back. He told me something else, too. He told me that about 2 weeks before Nana Rose's stroke, he had been looking out his window late at night, and he'd seen Cleo sitting on the fence between our properties, looking directly at Nana Rose's window. And it had made him think about Nana Rose, made him think that he hadn't seen her at her usual spot in the garden in a while, made him think about how she'd seemed a little distant the last time they'd spoken. "I almost called her that night," he said, "but I thought it was too late. I thought I'd call in the morning." He shook his head. "I should have called." He paused. "But the point is, I thought about her because of that cat. Sitting there and looking at that window, it made me think about her." I had to excuse myself for a moment when he told me this. I walked around the side of the house and I stood in the cold air and I cried. Not sad crying, the other kind. The kind that happens when something cracks open inside you and all the feeling rushes out at once. Cleo had been watching Nana Rose for weeks. She had seen something none of us had seen, or maybe something we had seen but dismissed or explained away or refused to sit with. She had been keeping vigil outside that door in the hallway, and on the night that something finally went wrong, she had positioned herself where she needed to be to make sure someone noticed. She hadn't barked, she hadn't yowled, she hadn't done anything dramatic or impossible. She had simply sat in the dark and waited, with that extraordinary patience, for someone to pay attention. And I had. We brought Nana Rose home from the hospital after a week. She came through the front door slowly, with a walker she was not happy about and a look on her face like she was assessing the house for flaws. She was tired. She was a little humbled, which for Nana Rose was significant because she was not naturally a humble woman, but she was herself, sharp and present and already complaining about the television being too loud. Cleo was in the living room when Nana Rose came in. She was sitting on the arm of the sofa, and she watched Nana Rose come through the door with those calm, golden, unflinching eyes. Nana Rose stopped. They looked at each other for a long moment. The whole room was quiet. I held my breath. Then Nana Rose said, in a voice that was much softer than her usual voice, "Come here." Cleo stepped down from the sofa arm. She walked across the room slowly, without hurry, and she stopped in front of Nana Rose and looked up at her. Nana Rose reached down, with some difficulty because of her balance, and she placed one hand very gently on top of Cleo's head. Cleo closed her eyes, and my grandmother, this tough, unsentimental, animal-is-for-outside woman, started to cry. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly, standing in her own living room, her hand on a cat's head, tears running down her 73-year-old face. I looked at Daniel. He was staring at the floor. His jaw was tight in the way jaws get when someone is fighting not to cry. "I know," Nana Rose said softly to Cleo, like they were having a private conversation, like she was continuing something that had already been started. "I know. Thank you." I don't think I have ever felt anything quite like what I felt in that moment. It was like watching something break open and something else rush in to fill the space. My mother was the last to understand, and in some ways, she took it the hardest. She came to me the evening after Nana Rose came home. She sat down at the kitchen table across from me, and for a moment, she just looked at her hands. My mom almost never looked at her hands. She was a meet-your-eyes person. "Daniel told me," she said finally, "about how you found her, about the cat." "Yeah," I said quietly. Another silence. "I've been thinking about it all day," she said. "I keep thinking about all those nights." She stopped, started again. "I kept putting her outside because I thought, I don't know what I thought, that animals outside is just how it's done. That's how I grew up." "I know, Mom." "But she was watching over her." She said it quietly, like she was still turning the idea over in her mind. "All that time, she was doing something none of us were doing." She looked up at me. "We weren't watching. We were all just living our lives, and that cat was watching." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My mom was quiet for another moment. Then she said, "She can sleep inside. She can sleep wherever she wants." Her voice was rough. "No more putting her outside." I nodded. My throat was too tight for much more than that. Daniel came to me a few days later. He was awkward about it in the way that young men often are when they have to say something that requires them to admit they were wrong. He stood in the doorway of my room, and he looked at Cleo sitting on my bed, and he was quiet for a moment. "I said some stuff," he said finally. "You said a lot of stuff," I agreed, but gently. "The thing about how she'd leave if you stopped feeding her." He exhaled. "That was a stupid thing to say." "Yeah. She didn't have to do anything," he said. "She didn't have to, we treated her like she was nothing. We kept locking her out in the cold, and she still," he stopped himself, collected himself, "she still saved Nana." "She did," I said. He nodded slowly. He looked at Cleo for a moment longer. Then he said, "Hey, Cleo." Cleo looked at him, those calm, golden, ancient-knowing eyes. He made a small sound that was almost a laugh and mostly a sigh, and he shook his head. "Sorry," he said to her. "I was an idiot." Cleo blinked at him slowly, once, twice. That long, deliberate, slow blink that cats do when they're at ease, when they trust you. Daniel blinked back. I don't think he knew that's how cats communicate. I had told him once, and he'd made fun of me for it, but he did it anyway, instinctively. "Okay," he said quietly, and he walked away. Nana Rose's rehabilitation went well, better than the doctors expected, actually. She was determined in the way that only people who have come very close to something frightening can be, and she worked hard. She got her balance back, her speech was unaffected, her sharpness, which had never really left, became more focused somehow, more deliberate. But the most remarkable thing, the thing that none of us had expected, was what changed in her relationship with Cleo. Nana Rose became Cleo's person. It happened gradually and then all at once, the way those things do. Cleo started sitting with Nana Rose in the afternoons when she did her rehabilitation exercises. She started sleeping at the foot of Nana Rose's bed, which Nana Rose had, without announcement, without ceremony, simply begun allowing. She started following Nana Rose from room to room in the gentle, unobtrusive way that cats follow the people they love. Not underfoot, not demanding, just present, just there. And Nana Rose, who had spent my entire life saying that animals belonged outside, that cats were strange and unlucky, that there was something unsettling about the way they watched, Nana Rose began talking to Cleo, full conversations, conducted in a low, private voice as Cleo sat beside her and listened with those unwavering golden eyes. I caught pieces of them sometimes, fragments. Nana Rose telling Cleo about her day, about how the physical therapist had made her do too many repetitions, about how she'd dreamed about her late husband. Cleo listening, occasionally blinking, occasionally shifting closer. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever watched. One evening in January, I was sitting in the living room and Nana Rose came in and sat down in her chair. Cleo jumped up onto the armrest beside her, which she had recently claimed as her dedicated spot, and Nana Rose absently put her hand on Cleo's back. "You know what I've been thinking about?" Nana Rose said. "What?" I asked. "All those nights." She was looking at the window. "When we put her outside, all those cold nights." She shook her head slowly. "I was so sure I was right. I've been sure I was right about a lot of things." She was quiet for a moment. "It's a terrible feeling, realizing you were wrong about something for a long time." "But you realized it," I said, "because she showed me." Nana Rose looked at Cleo. "I don't know how she knew. I don't know what she is exactly, but she showed me." I thought about what Nana Rose had always said. That cat watches too much. Animals that watch like that know things. And I thought about how she'd been right all along, just in the opposite direction from what she'd feared. Cleo hadn't been watching because there was something wrong with her. She'd been watching because there was something wrong with us, something we couldn't see, and she was patient enough and wise enough to wait until she could show us. I got the job. The second interview turned into an offer, and the offer turned into a start date, and the start date turned into my first paycheck. And slowly, steadily, the rubble of that rough period in my life started to become the foundation of something new. I stayed in my mother's house longer than I'd originally planned. Not because I had to, I could have moved sooner, but because something had shifted there. The house felt different. Not perfect, it was still full of opinions and strong personalities and the particular chaos that comes with multiple adults living together, but there was a warmth in it now that hadn't been there before. Or maybe the warmth had always been there and something had cracked open the surface so it could finally get out. Cleo slept on my bed every night. My mother never mentioned it. Daniel sometimes came and sat on my floor and watched a movie with me, with Cleo eventually migrating from my lap to his because she did things like that. She distributed her attention with a fairness that felt almost deliberate. He would pretend not to enjoy it. He enjoyed it enormously. Nana Rose improved steadily. She made it to full rehabilitation and beyond. She was back in her garden by spring, arguing with Mr. Patterson over the fence about whether the soil needed more lime, which was as close to perfect health as Nana Rose was ever going to get, and exactly where she wanted to be. Mr. Patterson, by the way, told me that he had adopted a cat of his own, a gray one from the local shelter. He said he hadn't planned to, but after everything that had happened, he found himself thinking that the right kind of company made all the difference. He named her Rosie. I told Nana Rose, and she pretended to be appalled and was secretly, obviously delighted. Cleo is 3 years old now. She's not so small anymore. She's become this sleek, glossy, deeply self-possessed creature with a look in her eyes that still stops me sometimes. That look that seems to understand more than it should. That look that says, "I see you. I see all of you. I'm paying attention." She sits in the window in the mornings and watches the street with the calm confidence of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and why. She greets me at the door. She checks on Nana Rose every single day, and Nana Rose no longer pretends she's anything other than completely devoted to her. She came into our house during the worst period of my life, and she watched. She watched us be foolish and dismissive and blind. She watched us lock her out into the cold night after night, and she bore it with more dignity than we deserved. She watched one of us begin to slip in the dark, and she positioned herself, quietly, patiently, impossibly, right where she needed to be. She didn't save Nana Rose with drama or spectacle. She saved her the way she did everything, quietly, consistently, with complete and unshakable attention. My brother said, once, that animals only care because you feed them, that the moment you stop, they leave. Cleo was locked out every night. She had every reason to walk away and never come back. She didn't leave. We had it exactly backwards, all of us. We thought she needed us. She was taking care of us the whole time. I think about that night a lot. 2 a.m, the house quiet, me padding down the hallway for a glass of water I didn't really need. Some people would say it was coincidence that I was awake. Some people would say it was luck. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that Cleo had been sitting outside that door for a reason, and I believe that some part of me, some instinct that I had almost buried under years of rationalism and grown-up practicality, heard something in the stillness of that hallway that made me stop, made me look, made me knock. I believe she called me there, not with sound, not with any of the obvious things, with presence, with that deep, patient, impossible attention of hers. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it was coincidence, maybe it was luck. But I have watched Cleo for 3 years now, and I have stopped being sure about anything that dismisses what she is capable of, what any of them are capable of, these creatures we share our lives with, who we so casually decide we understand. We don't understand them, not even a little, and maybe that's the most important thing they have to teach us. If you're watching this and you have a pet, a cat, a dog, any creature who has chosen to be in your life, I want you to think about what it means that they chose you. Not because you're perfect, not because you always get it right, but because they see something in you that's worth staying for, worth watching over, worth waiting in the cold, dark hallway for. Don't let anyone tell you that's nothing. Don't let anyone reduce that to just feeding schedules and convenient companionship. That kind of loyalty, quiet, consistent, unshakable, is rarer than most people will ever know. Cleo taught us that. She taught us by doing exactly what she always did. She watched, she waited, and when the moment came, she made sure someone was paying attention. Comment below and let me know where you're watching from, and tell me about the pet in your life who has surprised you, who has shown you something you didn't expect. I want to hear your stories. And if you believe that pets are family, real, irreplaceable, watching over us family, subscribe to this channel because we have more stories like this one. Stories about the animals who love us better than we love ourselves sometimes. Stories that deserve to be told. Cleo says thank you for watching. She's currently sitting in the window, keeping an eye on the street. Some things never change, and I wouldn't have it any other way. This story was inspired by and adapted from real-life experiences. Some details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. The love, however, that part is completely true.